Hello, I'm Lindy Gooden. Welcome to the Insurance Innovators Panel Discussion, a practical guide to achieving AI excellence in insurance, readying data and reaching the full potential of analytics. Today we're hosted in association with Genpact. Great to have you with us today. Now, Genpact's recent report showed that within large companies, 54% of senior executives say they plan to use AI to transform their processes over the next few years. That's an important step, isn't it? AI adoption is increasing rapidly across industries. So it's really important for insurers to also figure out how to get it right, to stay at the cutting edge of innovation and ahead of the competition. And we're here today to offer you some practical ideas and steps to take on the path to achieving AI excellence across your organization. We'll investigate the crucial role that data and analytics play in this radical reworking of the industry and how you can understand your place in it in the future. Before we do that, let's meet our fantastic panel. First of all is Adosa Adaro. Hello, Adosa.
Hello, Lindley.
Good to see you again. Adosa is the head of data services at AXA. He has over 20 years of international experience in various senior data leadership roles within a variety of multinational organizations, including Barclays Group, the European Commission, Allianz Cornhill Insurance and British Sky Broadcasting Corporation. Currently head of data services at AXA, the world's second largest financial services company by revenue. Adosa has accountability for data vision, strategy, architecture, engineering science, AI, governance and operations too. In other words, lots. Good to have you with us again.
It's great to be here.
Next we have Dr. Jemma Gallagher. Hello, Jemma. How are you?
Hi, Lindley.
Good to have you with us. Jemma is the Global Head of AI and Advanced Business Analytics at Allianz. Now, she's responsible for business transformation and innovation through AI, data science and data technologies. Before joining Allianz, Jemma led research in the area of machine learning at INRIA in France, where she has held a tenured position since 2010 before Allianz. And before joining insurance, Jemma worked as a researcher at several institutes throughout Europe and the US. She received a PhD in computer science from the Technical University of Barcelona, and Jemma has published more than 40 scientific papers in international journals, and since I moved to Allianz, has also utilized that scientific and technological background to drive business impact. Great to have you with us too.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Simon Jones. Simon, hello.
Hello.
Simon is a lead data scientist at Angini, a pioneering telematics motor insurance broker focusing on younger drivers. He's worked previously at The Flow, a leading mobility insurtech partner, and as an academic neuroscientist for over a decade before entering insurance. Great to have you too.
Great to be here.
And last but not least, we have Alex Plenty. Hello, Alex.
Hello.
Alex is Vice President and Data and Analytics Service Line Lead for Genpact's European operations. He has over 25 years of experience in the strategy and delivery of advanced analytics solutions to the insurance industry across life, general and specialty lines. He leads Genpact's European consulting business for data and analytics, including big data, data science and data engineering, and has served as program director on analytics change programs for the largest UK and international insurers. Great to have you all with us. That's a lot of experience in our room today. Over the next hour, we will be covering lots of ground. You may well have a few burning questions or comments for us, so we want to give you the opportunity to put them to our panel today. Send them in throughout the discussion, either using the Twitter hashtag, which today is simply AI19, or via the comment section below us here. We'll get to as many as we can towards the end of the hour. Lots coming on already. I want to hear from you. So let's kick off by looking at AI and the industry today. The term and the technology come with so many complex questions, and the scale of the task ahead can often feel a bit overwhelming. But if you apply the principles in tech in the right way, the future is incredibly exciting. So let's start with the now. Jemma, kick us off. Where is AI and analytics? Where are they having the biggest impact in insurance, do you think, at the moment?
At the moment, where we observe the greatest impact is through our core processes. So here I'm talking more about claims and underwriting. So we see AI being used into image recognition, into fraud detection, so to make real-time claim processing, which before was not possible. And as well in underwriting. So in underwriting, we can assess risks much better, and we can in real time offer policies. Yeah. So I would say this is the greatest impact of AI today.
Really interesting. And everyone has their own version of what that is to them and their businesses, but clearly so many developments. Simon, what do you think? Where are the biggest impacts, do you think?
Yeah, I agree with Jemma, but I'd pick up particularly on the fraud angle, where so far I think that's been the area where AI, machine learning has been deployed most effectively. because there's large amounts of historic data that can be mined in order to identify anomalies, flag them up for a human being to look at. So that's integrated into the existing business models very effectively.
Many people watching us today, there are lots of them, may have similar ideas. DOSA, image recognition, image analysis and interpretation were mentioned there. What do you think?
Yeah, I would have to agree. You know, Gemma, I think you've sort of covered, you know, some of the breadth of where we're seeing those impacts. I think, you know, mobile phones have taken a whole new life now, haven't they? Yeah. You can now actually just get insurance just by taking a photograph of yourself and sending that across. You can use photos to get claims resolved. You know, so there's a huge amount there. But if we're being entirely honest, Lindley, we're only scratching the surface at the moment. There's a huge amount more scope for exciting things to come.
These are exciting little glimpses of where insurance can be brought to me as a consumer, where I can start to use it more effectively and have a better relationship, which has been the holy grail for a long time. Alex, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that point. I mean, the guys have made some very relevant observations. I think I would also, you know, highlight the interaction with customers now being very targeted, specific, and deep in terms of understanding the need, and also the ability to tailor the products and services in a much more granular way for specific situations. So yeah.
So we have a little idea already of the what's changed, what the impact is. Adosa, what about the who? Who's doing it really well? Who's setting that bar really high?
Yes. I'll try not to create a bit of a battle between Allianz and AXA here. But I think, you know, it's fair to say that the big established organisations haven't really set the bar for us at the moment. The guys who are actually out there creating the excitement, you know, our likes of Lemonade, who've actually, they now have a world record in claims settlement. 3 seconds, you know, is incredible. You know, I think, you know, you can look at likes of Zurich, who do the face quote, you know. It is interesting, but like I say, we're still just scratching the surface.
Early days. Gemma, what do you think about that? Your name was mentioned.
Yeah, I think that I agree with this statement. I think, however, one of the things that companies like AXA and Allianz have is that we cover the whole insurance value chain. So the startups, they disrupt specific parts of the value chain, and still we see the whole end-to-end. And we also cover a lot of risks, from breaches to microinsurance in developing countries. So I think the scope is very broad and is very wide, and that's where AI also can have the highest impact in this very wide value chain.
And it seems as though microinsurance, real-time, if you like, insurance, maybe pay-as-you-go insurance, these things are interesting ways to go now. Any thoughts from you, Alex, on who's doing it well? Any case studies of AI working well in the industry?
Yeah, so one case study which comes to mind is where we've worked with one of the largest reinsurance providers in the world, where we found, working with them, that their underwriters were very swamped by the number of submissions that they were having to deal with. So they were behind in where they should be on earned premium and those kinds of metrics. So we've helped them by implementing some of the artificial intelligence techniques like natural language processing in order to look at those submissions and actually segment them based on attractiveness to the business and prioritize those for underwriting, investigation, and work which otherwise they would have missed. So you know, data science, AI is a broad church, and the application of NLP, NLU, was able to really improve those key metrics for that particular business.
It sounds like quite a sort of, I hate to use the word holistic, but I've just used it. You know, a wider view, a more natural view of how the people and the technology are interacting. Is that kind of where everyone needs to really focus? What do you think, Simon? You know, that relationship between people and tech. Look, it hasn't been easy. It hasn't been an easy bedfellow until potentially now.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And some of the startups I'm most where I see the most effective application of AI. For example, there's a drone insurance startup called Flock, who take advantage of their advanced machine learning algorithms, which are calculating risk, to allow the customer to shape and plan their risk in a kind of usage-based model, which completely transforms the way that you'd go about purchasing insurance and what you'd look to your insurance to provide you, because they're actually planning what their activities are using their insurer's app.
Is the industry doing well at thinking that way? Because actually, it's a mindset really in some ways, isn't it? To try to translate what we do and pushing out products as it always was to something that I, as a consumer, whoever I am, wherever I am in the world, whatever I'm doing right now, can use.
I think it's quite variable. I think there are some large incumbents who are trying to embrace it as best they can, and there's been some great successes. And I think the difference is that a lot of the startups, they're thinking that way from the get-go. But that doesn't mean that they're all going to be successful. Startups don't all make it. And so I think the thing is whether or not you embrace it successfully or not, and whether you are able to get some real use out of it, will be what determines your market position in the future. I think a lot of different companies are going to rise and fall as a result of AI coming into the industry and disrupting it.
Really interesting. Let's stay with that for a moment, because the longevity of startups, the way that you work together over time is really important, and potentially that's been lost in all of our conversations till now. Alex, what do you think in terms of the ongoing relationship between partners actually? How important is that to make, AI in this case, really function, work well for customers, but also work slickly between partners?
Well, I think it's going to be really important, and I think we're starting to see, broader ecosystems of organisations working together in ways that they haven't done till now. This has been, to a degree, precipitated by things like sharing data across multiple external platforms, the use of things like hybrid cloud, new business models and new ways of working. So I think all of that is only going to increase.
Well, let's go back to the now at DOSA. Quick wins for AI as we go. I mean, where can you start to make real quick, potentially small progress?
Yeah, I think the area that a lot of us big insurers would focus on is around our operational cost. So it's a big area there is around fraud. Fraud analytics, it's around how we process our claims. So you see a number of applications and use cases really successful, being implemented in that space. However, that doesn't touch customers directly quite a lot from that perspective. However, if you looked at what are the big potential areas to get into, I think from a customer sort of perspective, Lindley, it's what are the things that are going to take out the friction from our interaction? What are the things that are going to be at the point of, yes, we have a few things at the moment that help on the policy sales side of things, but how about the times when you really need your insurer to be there for you, where you suffered a loss, where you're in distress, taking that heat out of those situations, such that you don't have to sit on the phone waiting for a response. How about using AI to actually, resolve those kind of situations? Get you an Uber, get you a drone to do the sort of inspections of the car, and getting the claim sorted. There's great applications potentially there.
It's a maelstrom of potential. The thing is actually having a clear view. Gemma, what do you think about this? I mean, it also mentioned friction. Number one, if certainly in the claims process, if I need to make a claim, I need it now. I'm not messing about, but then I'm an honest customer. There are many nuances here, but where do you think has to be focused on? I mean, whatever year it is, what do you have to focus on as an insurer who's nimble and uses AI?
Yeah, I think most of it, for me, it's customer experience, customer needs. Customer is at the center. Even when we are working in our core processes to make them more efficient, fraud, at the end it's for the customer so that the claim can be quickly processed. So AI only makes sense if you have the right business problem, and this is to solve some customer problem. So this is very important. Yeah.
Simon, from your research and your work, what shouldn't I do as an insurer who's embracing AI possibly a little bit too closely?
Yeah. Well, I'd say don't just hire some data scientists because you've heard that that's what you ought to be doing, and then stick them in a corner without any support for a long time and hope that that will result in some kind of magic, then get frustrated when it doesn't.
I can't believe you're saying this. This is my entire business model. I'm an insurer. Surely that's what I do. No, I mean, but the market for data scientists has never been hotter. So what do I need in my data science department?
Well, I think you need a data team which is going to be multidisciplinary, and it's going to involve data scientists, but also people with complementary skills, so that they are actually able to escape the lab trap and take their models live, they might not be able to deploy them without some kind of approvals process, but being able to put them in some kind of proof of concept prototype state where you can really see what it would be like if a customer had access to it, and making that process as smooth as possible enables you to get the ideas that the data are inspiring you to have into the real world as quickly as possible. And then you can really see the value.
Well, look, I mean, our conversation today is all about practicality, so let's stay with that again. Look, you know, we're currently in this, our first section is about where are we? We're hiring data scientists at DOSA. We're hiring a lot of data scientists. What makeup do you need in your data science department to make that work really well, to come up with great ideas, business application? Do you need the same person times 100, or do you need everyone to be very different? What do you need?
No, I think it's the latter, Lindley. When you think about, you know, I think Simon started to touch on it there. You know, you want to be able to come away from, I've just done some R&D. In the end, you know, AI is useless if it doesn't go into production and actually start to deliver value. What are those things that actually make that happen? You know, there's lots of skills that we require. There's lots of talk about a data scientist spends maybe 50% of the time, you know, doing things that aren't data science. You know, it's ludicrous to think that that skill that is in such high demand isn't actually being utilized, you know, efficiently. So you want engineers, you want operational people, you want analysts, you want people that actually make it all come together to actually, you know, go into production. So I think that's what you need.
Alex, what do you need?
Well, yeah, as well as those people and those skills, you need a method. You need a framework, and we can talk about frameworks as much as we want, but the one that I want to focus on is being clear up front exactly how you're going to justify that this model does do what it's supposed to do. And also that you can continue to use that justification as it evolves over time, because these models don't become static. They will need to be revisited, and you will need to continually justify how that model has come up with that decision, why that's the right answer, and what controls and checks and balances you have around ensuring that it doesn't make the wrong decision point. So those pieces as well are definitely really important.
You mentioned continually. I mean, it's almost continuous, isn't it? You need to, you need to at every step complete, refresh, make sure you're feeding in the right information. That's the whole idea of AI in principle.
You've got to have a plan, I think, and it's got to be one that's informed by all of the various issues which are involved. You can't just blunder into it. You've got to think very carefully, as you were saying, about how is this going to go on? How is it going to be used? How's it going to be revisited? How's it going to be maintained? How's it going to be audited? Otherwise, you will end up just tucking it in a corner and being ashamed of the money that you've spent on it.
Or spending a lot more money on it.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Does that make sense, Gemma, as well? Just have a plan, really plan to the nth degree, and then test and learn, start to feed that back into your model. Is that absolutely the only way to go with this?
Well, I think there is no plan that will keep you to success. You need to keep agile to change it when things don't work, or to change the problem, or to add new data sources, to add new people. I fully agree with the comments we are having here. So it's this multidisciplinary team. It's having also the business involved, and being able to be agile and change on the go. So I don't believe a perfect plan exists or a perfect formula, but being more nimble.
I'd like to clarify that a plan is not a straitjacket. You're absolutely right. You've got to be agile about it, but it's about having some kind of guiding framework within which you're then able to modify, to actually think about it, I suppose.
I think another one that is coming up to the fore is, how do you explain the model? Explainable AI is really been left as an afterthought to my experience, and there are some new tools and techniques for enabling organizations to explain how the AI is making a decision, especially around something like deep learning. Very difficult.
Very difficult indeed, yes. And I think there's a lot of talk at the moment around, actually, are we employing the right techniques to the right use cases? Because like you say, deep learning is a challenge to explain. So,
Again, early days. I mean, that's a bit of a fob off, really. But it is early days. You still have to test and learn and work out how this technology or technologies will integrate into the way you do business better. But in terms of customer experience, which is at the heart of this, Gemma, you mentioned it at the start. How will adopting AI and then working with it, testing, learning, doing what we've talked about, how will that transform customer experience, do you think?
Customer excellence starts with data because it's only with data that you can understand the customer needs, and this is the first point. So, when we analyze the touch points of customers in the different journeys, like from pre-sales, sales, the service, we realize that the customer needs are going around certain areas. The first one is they want to see simple products, right? They want to see products that they can understand and that they are fitting their needs of the moment, no more, no less. They want to have services that are very quick as with tech companies, right? As quick as using the phone. And of course, they want to recover from the loss as quickly as possible and get services if these services are available. So AI helps in all these areas, understanding the customer needs through the behavioral data, through other types of data sources already helps you to pre-package which products a certain person will be needing. We already mentioned before for just serving claims or filing claims. Right now you can do it quite instantly. Even there are some insurers in the US that use drones to take pictures of certain areas and even file the claim before this person has the time to file the claim. Right, so I think AI is enhancing this customer experience massively thanks to the different data streams.
And it allows you as an insurer to become less of a transactional, functional relationship and much more of a part of my life and able to guide me, if you like, as a customer. The trick is to get me as a customer to want to be guided, and that's still a job to be done. Well, look, over the last few months, Insurance Innovators has hosted several live panel discussions about these issues and others. We've talked about the use of AI in a wide range of industries, and time again, it's data that fuels and supports the benefits of AI. It's at the heart of it. We've already referred to that. Adosa, kick us off. How do you, let's look at this. Let's have the frown first of all. How do you overcome poor data quality as you learn to train and feed your AI?
Yeah, it is the age-old problem, isn't it? I think you start off with the simple, basic things around, having sensible validation rules. You can be quite creative about it these days, as opposed to what you'd have done in the past. You could actually put rules in there to flag as opposed to filter. That's a big issue and a big change in sort of mindset. But you can go beyond that. You can go and actually, interestingly, employ AI and using data enrichment and combine that with AI to actually start to improve the quality of the data in itself. But I think one of the areas that is really exciting I'm finding is this sort of emergent concept of the connected silo. It's a bit of a strange one because everyone sits around and this silo is this evil thing everyone's going to get rid of. But actually, when you think about silos, they're actually very focused little bits of process, and data. And they've been quite successful even in terms of in AI. If you focus on, I only want to do this use case, that's a data set I require. It does actually help to do that. The big problem is a disconnected. Right.
So that's always been, that has been the problem. It's always been about the people, really, as much as anything else. The fact that people don't talk to each other, there's a superiority, there's an ego element of it. And actually, if everyone shares the same outlook and the same reason for doing what I do well, which, yes, is the customer, but essentially I want to be paid well. I want to do some interesting work. I want to be rewarded for what I do. These things are important. You have to, by being connected silos, you're good at what you do, but also you're really happy to talk to everybody else to get that job done. That's important. The connection between departments, right? Are there any common issues in terms of data sets, in terms of the problems that you might encounter? I'd also mentioned the rules. How do you build a really good set of rules that are flexible enough and you can bring in the data? Alex, what do you think?
Well, I don't think the right approach is to build a monolithic set of rules and then try and force all of your data through it. I know organisations have spent a lot of time and money doing that for good reason, and partly because of technology limitations that have been inherited from past years. But going forward, you need to be as agile as you are with your data quality, as you are with your models and data exploitation. And so I always think of starting from the purpose of the data and suggest that data quality doesn't exist in isolation and abstraction. It's data quality as it relates to a particular purpose.
Absolutely.
And that helps it break down a little bit certainly on a tactical level to sort of focus the data quality on the things that you need the data for to make the decisions or drive the models that you're working with right now, but enable you to build that up over time and then reapply them where they're relevant and don't apply them where they're not, and make that decision more intelligently about how the data is being used and what's the impact of poor data quality in that specific use case, not at some abstract level.
Well, that seems to fit with regulation as well, in that,
Sure.
that's the purpose of the data, certainly personal data, which is what we're talking about essentially. That fits perfectly. And that's not a coincidence that they work independently as opposed to you have to make sure you have a purpose for that data. What about data bias, Simon? How do you overcome that?
Well, that's incredibly difficult, I think, but it requires you to, first of all, be open-minded to the possibility that it exists. The hard thing with bias is that you might not obviously detect that it's there in your data set. It's typically around the issue of how it's been collected. But this is where the human element really comes in, and it's very much the job of your data team or your data scientists to think a great deal about how the data might well be biased away from the distribution you're actually trying to model effectively, and whether that should be corrected via some kind of applied adjustment, or whether or not it's a question of gathering some additional data.
So you don't want, if your business is particularly successful in one line, then understandably you go chase more of that business. That's the data you have, that seems to take you down that road. So what you're saying is there should be some kind of balance, there should be some kind of way of continuing to take a wider view of the industry.
Yeah, to take your example, if you conceive of a business that's extremely successful in one line, they've probably got a bunch of skills that would transfer very successfully to another line, but they don't yet have the data. But by thinking creatively about the problem, you could identify publicly accessible data or data that's possible to be purchased from a data broker that could enable you to apply the same kind of incredibly successful techniques you've got in one line to the new line, and then you've got virgin territory, which could be much more profitable to pursue than yet more business within a line where you've perhaps already reached a kind of plateau in your success.
Yeah. I'd also mentioned silos. Let's just pop into silos for a moment, because yes, my monologue said yes, it's the communication between silos that's really important. What do you think in terms of making this? What was the micro, not micro silos?
Connected
Connected
silos.
silos.
Yeah.
So how do you make that work, Jemma? How do you start to get those specialists to work together?
I think I would say what works is to have across different departments, and then we see actually the silos are associated to departments, right? So across different departments to have the same purpose, right?
Yes.
The same business logic and the same objective. So I give you an example of my company. Right now we are aligning all of us with the Allianz customer model, so making process very efficient and just including AI and data to make it very transparent and very efficient. And when you have all the departments aligned, then you can build these cross-functional teams that work on the data from wherever it is, right? And then you need to put it into a place that you can work with it. Then, of course, comes the problem of the question about data accessibility, and that you also need for breaking the data silos. And I believe it's very important that across all these systems where you might have data, you should have the opportunity to pull them into the same system in order to be working on this data together.
Perfect idea. What's in it for me as a member of the team to work with that in that model? Because actually you still have to convince the people to go with you and to work in a certain way. How do you convince them?
You convince them with the value you bring, and you can bring value relatively quick. Even on the claims department, you can bring value to the underwriting department, right? Because you need to understand the losses in order to be able to make prediction of better risk. And it's by measuring the value, so you need to have very clear measures already at the start, and having these very quick iterations so that people get convinced. Yeah. Maybe you touched the problem of culture, which of course it's there, right? Why should I be doing that, right? I have been doing my work already, my data silo for some time, and I think what you realize by doing this experimentation is that you get a better way of working, and you get a better customer centricity, which at the end is what matters.
Also makes your life a lot easier. I mean,
Yeah.
we're talking about data in this section, data, but actually, before we came on today, it became very clear that actually the way that people and the tech and the people work together is fundamental to making that data work, to make the relationships and the connections work is really important. Alex, what about integration of your data suite? I mean, how viable is it to have a fully integrated data suite, do you think?
Well,
And what does that even mean? I mean, it'll depend on who you are, I suppose.
it depends. I think the short answer is it depends. So I'm glad you started with that. But I'd come back to the silos and the agility and taking a sort of a DevOps approach to building data solutions. How viable is it to put all of the data and connect it all together? I don't think that's ever going to work. But how viable is it to connect the right data together at the right time for the right use case with the right entitlements and data quality and approvals? Absolutely, that is achievable, and it relies on having the layers underneath the data scientists, including the frameworks and the engineers and the metadata, which is a subject dear to my heart, which enables this type of working. So those are the things I'd be looking to try and achieve. Certainly not integrate everything.
Adosa, that makes sense to you, I'm sure, as well.
Well, absolutely. So the idea of a connected silo, if you like, is logical. Yeah. So I think a lot of people think of data all in one place, but actually, who really cares whether it's in one place or not? Insofar as actually what I can do is get access to what I want when I need it. It's easy to access the data. I have the right tools to actually manipulate the data. For instance, as a data scientist, if you say to a data scientist, okay, you know what, we just want all of this data in one place, but actually what you find is you haven't got the right tools to be able to use that data in that place, you've then got a problem. So I think it's making sure that regardless of whether it's physically in one place, think about the cloud, you're not going to have everything really under your desk anymore. It's actually a logical concept, and making sure that actually you can actually interact with all of that data and access it.
If those connections are good, but you also need to make sure, with data bias again, or accuracy data, you need to make sure that data is reliable, otherwise people will be turned away and go for their own sources, but sources are available. And I'm going to use the phrase Internet of Things. Simon, you may not have heard of that phrase before, but how do you start to bring in really good real-time data, but difficult to assess data and make that really work for you as an insurer?
Well, it comes down to one of the things that I think is probably relevant to why some companies have had a lot of difficulty with handling data science in general, is that you've got to get your software engineering element right, whether that's in-house or outsourced. This data is potentially available if you can write code that will feed it through into a system which is properly structured, the metadata is present, whether it's one location or several different locations, but they are connected. Then you can start putting them in the hands of people who are capable of processing that data in some fashion. And this is really where AI has generated most of its buzz from, is that there's brand new data sources that can't be handled by the types of models that the insurance industry is used to using. But if they're passed through the right model, then you're dealing with it in the same kind of way in general as we're used to handling that kind of data, which means that you can plug it into your pricing model, or you can use it to help you automate a particular process. But it's about having all the different elements to be connected up so that somebody can actually train up a machine learning, artificial intelligence system that will handle that data in real time, and then send it somewhere useful so that your business is actually getting value from it.
Well, it's really interesting because I mentioned partnerships earlier on. If you're a smaller insurer, then perhaps you won't have the in-house capability to design this stuff yourself. If you're a larger insurer, perhaps you'll be too slow. Maybe you've got, maybe you're top heavy. Maybe whatever it might be. There are difficulties in bringing in the most useful people and tools to interpret the data at the top end. And IoT is something that people will be talking about every day of the week. So how should you, what's the simple, if there is one, simple thing you need to do to change your company from using all your old internal data that is maybe good but maybe not timely, to being able to interpret those sources? Do you have to work with others? Do you have to bring in technology? Do you have to bring in new people? What is number one?
You have to do all of those things. But you don't necessarily have to do all of them at some enormous scale. Right. I would think that the best way of doing it is probably to set up a relatively small team who look at that problem and are thinking about it from very much the general business use case and some specific examples which are the problem immediately in front of them. Yeah. Then consider whether or not there are good outsourcing partners who can give you the capacities that you lack immediately, or if there are specific skill sets that you want to have in-house where you'd hire a member of staff. For example, a lot of companies would, in my field of telematics, maybe outsource the gathering of their data and even the processing of that data into more standard insurance rating factors relating to speeding or harsh braking behavior. But then the actual actuarial side of things, where you're building a risk model out of that, you very much want to keep in-house. That's one of your core competences. And then turning that into a proposition which you sell to customers, again, it's a core competence and you want to be in control of that.
Fantastic. Before we move on to our final section about strategies, Jemma, final question really is how does AI help you to start to tap into new data sources, potentially select new data sources? How does that happen?
Data sources exist independently of AI. What AI helps us is to move these data sources to some purpose and some business objective. And to interpret the data. So the new data sources that we have today, apart from the internal data that we had always for the last 130 years, is the data of images, voice, text. So this type of data, and we already see a lot of applications that are quite advanced on this domain. So. In terms of voice, for instance, this is being used for fraud detection at the time of filing a claim, or sometimes even to recognize just the customer and give a very quick experience. And text, we are using it as well for just checking the news every day and predicting events of bankruptcy and chain. Supply chain interruptions. So this is what AI helps, interpreting these new sources of data, which of course still they need to be combined with internal data that we have.
Very good. Well, we're about 10 minutes away from your questions, so please do keep sending them in through the webpage right here or on Twitter, which today, while you're watching us live, has the hashtag AI19. Get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. Finally, let's tackle really the biggest barrier to wide-scale AI adoption, and that's examine and look at how to examine our AI future. There are so many questions here as well. Adosa, let's start with you. What are the biggest barriers, do you think, to wide-scale adoption of AI? You know, what is getting in the way in insurance today?
Yeah, it's a very it's an interesting question. I think that there's a number of barriers. You might say there's some around leadership, you might say there's some around strategy, you might say there's some around investment, funding, or you might say there's an intersection between all three. But actually, I might surprise you in saying that sometimes I think, and this is a barrier that a lot of people don't actually think about, is that sometimes technology in itself gets in the way. And the reason I say that is that sometimes technology is considered a silver bullet that solves all things. And actually what it does is comes in the way of people actually having human interactions to solve problems. And sometimes the problem is around how we're connecting amongst ourselves, how we're interacting, have we got the right skills, have we got the right people? And even if we have those right people, are they connecting in the right way? Are they interacting in the right way?
Alex, did you see that? I mean, there must be patterns. Those sound very familiar.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the thing that maybe is a common recurring theme for me is that artificial intelligence, and it breaks down into multiple disciplines, tends to get applied as point solutions without trying to join it all up from end to end. So I think it's important to think about not just a data flow end to end, but also a business process flow end to end, and think about the broadest definition of AI, whether it's NLP and image recognition and data science and whatever else. Where are the points where each of the application of these techniques can help? And it's augmenting your personal capability. You're augmenting the internal intelligence of the organization with artificial intelligence to have a material impact all the way along.
We've the plan, your plan, which will change, not the straitjacket. Your initial plan, the way that you can be nimble, these things have come through is very important. Also, the connectedness that you talked about, this is very important. Looking at the wider world around you is really important. But we also talked about skills and people, Jemma, and we talked about the sort of developers that you need in the business. I was going to ask you, how do you get the best developers and the right people into your business? But actually, a bigger question might be, how do you get the balance right for people who are good at what they do, great at what they do, but also different enough to be entrepreneurial?
Yes, this is of course a big question, and insurance a priori doesn't seem as exciting as working for big tech companies, right? I would still venture to say that we have a variety of problems which is can be quite in fact impactful for society, right? So when you think about it, and I think I was reading a report recently that only 30% of the assets for catastrophes are insured. So this leaves you 70% which are completely uninsured, and the cost is borne by the people or by the businesses themselves, right? So this is kind of slow down economies, and that's where you with AI can make available insurance to many parts and developing countries and different types of products. So first of all is getting the people through this purpose and this way of working. So
and we are, younger people have perhaps a more, greater awareness of what they want to be than we did. We took a job, right? We go into a career, we try and do something really interesting, but actually there's a much more kind of natural way of looking at work as part of my life now. So you need to be able to manage that as well. People need to be good at what they do, but also handled well, worked with well. That's really, really important. But also, let's not forget the board, Simon. How do you start to communicate the ROI? Let's face it, it still comes down to money. How do you get the ROI across to the board so that they adopt it? Because we all know if the board, the bosses don't adopt it, you're going nowhere for very long.
I think you've got to learn to talk their language. I think the thing that often data scientists will struggle with is we typically come out of academia and we're not used to even thinking in those terms. If money's a concern at all, it's in terms of grant funding. So learning what is meant by ROI, and I know some very senior data scientists in companies like the Norwegian State Oil Company who say you've got to commit to cost savings. You've got to actually say, look your CEO in the eye and say, I'm going to save you X number of million in the next 12 months, and then deliver on it. And you will find champions. And if you can find champions, then you can get all the other elements that you need in order to do experiments and demonstrate the performance. One of the advantages we have in the insurance industry is that people are fairly used to looking at graphs, discussing numbers, forecasts, projections, and the value of improved models. So
well,
it's totally possible.
An improved model might also be, actually we'll set our budgets based on the kind of work that we could do. I mean, ideas first, budget second, which is still a sort of novel way to run a business. But also there are things like that can be done. I mean, if data scientists had an excitable tone of voice, then actually you can communicate quite a lot in this exciting new opportunity that this business can actually benefit from.
Well, absolutely.
That's good.
Absolutely. I think Simon, you hit the nail on the head there. Value is a key thing that people need to think about a lot more. You're going to need support and sponsorship from CEOs, CFOs who want to understand how is this going to actually benefit the bottom line. And we have very, very clever ideas out there. Actually, it's just putting those into actually what does it mean? How does it improve our current situation? Is it that we're going to be able to sell more? Or is it that it's going to actually reduce the cost of operating or actually servicing our customers? Is it? Yeah. So it's really around that value proposition.
And how do you bring the board and the team together? This is a cultural thing again. We've touched on culture, but how do you start for everyone to share the same idea? Because there is still a separation in the boardroom sometimes.
Yeah, I think a key thing is, I suppose it's a bit of realism. It's about communication. So yes, we want to do all these exciting things. It's really interesting actually what Jemma was saying there around all these things that we can be doing from an insurance standpoint. Perhaps part of the challenge that we face is that we don't market it enough. The young people out there who are looking to get into work want to make a difference. lots of what insurance does is actually touch our lives. We are insurance customers ourselves, and actually it's going back to talking to data science and like, actually, is this thing going to deliver value? What sort of value is it actually going to deliver? If you can do that and communicate that back up such that we're all on the same page, we all sign up to the value we're trying to deliver, you get the sponsorship.
Simon, does that make sense? Is that even possible?
Yeah, well, I was going to say that my own experience of hiring at least the data science component of the data team, it's not difficult at all to persuade people to join the insurance industry. They're not thinking of it before they meet you. But if you can find a way of interacting with people when they're looking for, and to give away a little bit of my tactic, I suppose, academia is constantly shedding off people who've got all the necessary skills of scientists, who've got the coding elements, who are ready to be data scientists and maybe even heard that they want to be data scientists. And when they're confronted with the job market, the first things that they see are a bunch of kind of unethical businesses that they don't want to be a part of. And if you can get in there and talk to them and say, you know, insurance is actually something that does actually deliver a social good for the world. It protects people from great harm. And we've got tons of really interesting data that needs to be processed by all these cool models and technologies you want to work with. Why don't you come with us? My problem is finding enough positions for all the people who want to work with me, not finding enough qualified candidates.
That would be great, wouldn't it? If you could convince people who are really great at what they do, they're also kind of wide-eyed, bushy-tailed, ready to get involved. Wouldn't that be great for you, Jemma?
Yeah, sure. I wanted to add to what you are saying, Simon, that it's also very important for all these data scientists to keep them and also to get more positions in your team. To make this transparency to the board, right? Because the top support and is very important for us. So I think, and it's very difficult to show from day one what is the monetary value of what you create, right? So it's about this continuous creation of the value and continuous showing what you have, and then putting these data scientists on top of the board as well, right? So that they change the culture by being there and making a difference.
Alex, what do you think? Briefly.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's slightly maybe stepping outside of insurance and thinking about AI in the broadest terms. You know, that and the addition of 2 or 3 other big technology changes are going to have fantastically significant impacts on the whole of society. And I find it quite easy to have conversations with very bright, very keen data scientists who want to be a part of the change. And if that change is coming through the changes in the way that we sell insurance and underwrite risk and protect people, then that's all inspiring, and I think allows people to feel like they're really contributing in a way that's going to have a big difference.
So final thing really, before we move on to your questions, and it's a really difficult question, and the answer may be, I don't know, but in 10 years' time, will the insurance industry look the way it does now, with a perspective of this technology, of AI, and the way we interact with customers, the markets we're in? Any thoughts on what, Adosa, how will it look? Go on, get out the crystal ball.
I think if it looked anything like this, I'll be terribly disappointed. There is this huge amount of opportunity, Lindley, and I think that we touched on some of the possibilities. We haven't really touched too much, I suppose, on we touched on IoT or Internet of Things. Really, what makes that work and why that's such a big thing is that devices get connected and talk to each other. There's a huge amount of opportunity there in terms of just removing friction, by using that data that sits under these devices, whether that's your car, which would be driverless, or whatever else, or your home devices as well. But think about even beyond that. What could happen in terms of the insurance model in itself? Could it actually start to shift away from I'm the guy you want when there's a mishap or an issue, to one that actually helps you mitigate your risk. Like maybe we can stop that leak from happening, or the escape of water issues by monitoring your devices, your sensors on your pipes, things like that.
Seamless, consistent, point of need. I would like my insurance company to be a reassurance company. Not in the technical term. I'd like to be reassured and guided through to avoid things that I don't really want. That'd be really good. There are many things to be done. We just can't get into them right now. It's time for your question. It's been a great discussion so far. We're not done because it is time to hear from you. Thanks very much for sending in your questions and your comments through Twitter and the webpage right here. We'll get to them in just 1 second's time. But before we do that, please, if you can, take a very brief moment to rate today's webinar so far. A poll question should appear on your feed right about now. Your response is confidential, but really useful. So thanks very much for getting in touch. That'd be great. Okay, time for questions. Question here to my screen, some questions here as well. Michelle Fong. Hello, Michelle. Product and Partner Marketing Manager at Aviva. Hello. How should we start this journey? Start small scale on a single product or plan the whole customer journey for better cost savings? Interesting. Scale or tentative baby steps? Who thinks what? Simon, kick us off.
I think it very much depends upon the circumstances of the organisation you're in.
Yeah.
If you can get buy-in from a champion executive, or you are one yourself, to set up a kind of new parallel customer journey, plan it out with a great deal of detail from end to end, but not creating yourself something you can't be agile about, then it will be logical what the first thing you're going to start on is. You're always going to start small. You're always going to take a first step, whether you're traveling 1,000 miles or just around the corner. But there could be a great advantage to actually thinking about all the ways that these technologies could improve and transform your business. If you've got to persuade people that it's worth doing at all, then pick something really small, but that will have an impact, and demonstrate that you can actually deliver on it in order to generate that kind of confidence.
And let's face
my
it,
advice.
Insurance companies are not the first to do this. Banks have been doing it for a long time. You're testing and learning, and whereas perhaps early on, maybe 5-7 years ago, it would have been seen as a hobby, something on the side. We're just wasting money trying these things out. Actually, now, it's a mechanism. It's working.
Absolutely.
Adosa, yeah, what do you think? Large scale, test and learn.
Do you know? I would say think big, act small. I think it's little but often. The trouble with the big scale stuff is, in the end, what you could have is that people start to lose appetite. We haven't got any value out of this thing. When people start to think big numbers, that's the first thing that goes. It hasn't delivered any value. Let's cut our losses and go. If you think big, here's the entire journey. Here's what it might look like. We talked about plans, and it doesn't always work out exactly to plan. But think about what it might look like, and look at how can I deliver this in an iterative sort of fashion to deliver little but often value.
It's a creative process. If you don't start with a wish list and something you'd love to do in the end of it, then you're not going to go very far.
Yes.
It's going to be very much mechanical. A question here, Raj Pafali, thank you very much. I hope that's the way I pronounce your name, Raj. CEO at Claim Genius. Question is, what do you think about image analysis value add to auto insurance? Now, we've mentioned image analysis, auto insurance. Look, this is one of the things that I think is really exciting at the moment. Any thoughts, Alex? Yeah, Simon, please. Yeah.
I think that there's a tremendous amount of potential that's only just begun to be used, but what's already been done by some of the leaders has made an enormous change. From being able to take a photograph of your car in order to allow the insurer to make an estimate of what the cost of the claim is going to be within seconds of the accident actually happening, as part of an incredibly rapid claim-making process, that can save an enormous amount of money for an insurance company. Then there's a great many other ways that image analysis could be integrated into telematic and non-telematic propositions. This is fundamentally data that we weren't previously gathering, and so of course it can be used. And depending on what processes that you're involving it in, the savings could be anything between substantial and enormous. I'm a big fan.
You still have to really think about it and triangulate the problem. Telematics and image analysis are powerful together, but one perhaps is not the best way of doing it. There are things to be done still. We'll keep on bashing through. Thanks for that question. That was fantastic. Simone Ruiz-Vegote, thank you very much, MD at Allianz Climate Solutions. How can AI help to bridge the protection gap in developing countries? Gemma, I'm afraid I'll throw it to you straight away, briefly. But yes, it's really interesting. We talked about this before we came on. It was really an interesting area to talk about. What do you think about the power of AI in this?
This is a very tough question to answer, how to bridge this protection gap, particularly in these countries. So we know which products are currently active, and we need the healthcare or our business interruption. And I think the issue is how to bring these products to the people, right, to make them understand that this will bring the value. And I think what would just bridge the gap is to get integrated into the partners, to make it just more seamless into the daily life of people. And AI can definitely help there, because by having data from partners, you can also assess risk much quicker, and you can target prices which are much smaller and that are much fitting for the developing countries.
Yeah, if we think about geographical problems, I mean, perhaps remoteness, possibly, but actually use of mobile data. I mean, you know, there are powerful tools available if the data is allowed to be used that can give you a really good view of what's happening there and then plug those gaps. But you have to be quick, you have to be real time, don't you, Adosa?
Well, absolutely, absolutely. I think you know, Gemma, absolutely right there in terms of what the opportunities are. I think that some of the things that we need to resolve, I suppose, is the infrastructure sort of challenges around some developing countries. You know, the access to data, the quality of the data you might get. But absolutely a huge amount of opportunity. Yeah. The one thing that a lot of people don't actually think about in terms of a lot of developing countries is that there's accessibility to talent. There's a lot of skills out there. And that's a real positive from an AI perspective, that's for sure.
Very good. Question from Andrew Sims, product designer at Simply Business. How might AI be used to improve customers' experience at acquisition, where little in-house data is available? So, you know, onboarding, acquisition, this is particularly in some countries where fraud can be carried out there. Let's not think about the bad things first of all, but to get people in, it can be powerful.
Well, I mean, one of the things has been established over a little while, but is starting to get real traction at scale, is looking at the broader set of data from outside of the initial relationship. And of course, there are controls and restrictions about how to exploit that. But even with those in place, I think it's much more easier to build a bigger picture of an individual based on sharing of some initial data, which allows you to extrapolate out from there based on some access to third parties, data in the public domain, that kind of stuff.
Is it all about third-party data? Is it all about, you know, the IoT? Is it, or is it actually? I mean, you don't want to put people when you're onboarding through a long questionnaire.
Well,
that's very old
You
school.
definitely don't want to do that as well. I think, you know, Odessa was talking about some improvements in process where there's the opportunity to reuse questions from one interaction to the next, and that has got a long way further to go. Yeah, I think through the chatbots and those kinds of solutions.
I think so. I think that it varies depending on the type of insurance as well. You know, if you think about the difference between, say, life insurance and, say, household, you know, in theory, there's data available out there to give you a reasonable amount of view around the household, right? You know, it's the house exists. You know, there's data about what the maps and you know, is it in the floodplain or wherever else. So you can actually very, very quickly calculate a sense of what's the risk on this address. You know, so that, you know, I think is really using what we've got, and actually on the other hand is around accessibility to personal data. You know? So when it comes to, you know, data that actually, or insurance products that are life or personal, it's about, would you allow us to get access to data from X? And I think you'll come to that potentially because the data does exist.
Yeah. Any top tips, Alex, finally, before we do close today, on what I should do now to start to take AI to the next level? I know it depends on who I am and what I do and my customers, but good steps to look at to get this right.
Well, I would definitely set the vision for how is this going to look? What does success look like further out? But how am I going to take the baby steps? And don't miss the opportunity to learn as you go. Think about what you can harvest from each failure and how that's going to be reused on the next iteration. And look at velocity, because velocity in an agile term is a very good measure of value at each iteration. So if you are getting, you know, more throughput of ideas coming or value delivered or output per even something as small as a data integration piece of code, because of the reuse and the learning and the upskilling that's happening within the team, you should see those numbers tick up. And you won't get them in the first iteration, and you may not see them in the second, but you will see them coming through over a period of time, and that is, for me, that's a measure of real success.
Well, apologies for the coughing in the background. That's the last of the summer cold on the way out. I'm afraid that's all we have time for today. I do hope that you've enjoyed the last hour and that you found the insights from our panel really helpful in your quest to achieve AI excellence across your organisation and the industry as a whole. Thanks for sending in your questions. Sorry we couldn't get through them all, but they were fantastic. If you do have a couple more minutes before you leave us today, please do fill in the poll, which should be appearing on the discussion feed right about now, to give us your wider feedback. We really value your opinion. It's essential for us to AI our own webinars, so let us know what you thought, and we'll feed that back into the next one. If you enjoyed this conversation and you'd like to hear more, join us at Insurance Innovators Summit on the 13th and the 14th of November, where you'll hear from the likes of the Chief Executive Officer at Direct Line Group and the Chief Technology and Information Officer at Covea. A link with more information about the event will pop into your feed now. Check it out. Also, Genpact will be releasing a report at the end of this month looking at insurance in the age of instinct. It examines the macro trends impacting the insurance industry and how insurers will need to respond to survive and thrive over the next 10 years. Anyone who's subscribed to today's discussion will get an email with a link to that report once it's published, so look forward to that. Thanks again for joining us. Thanks to our panel. It was fantastic to have you with us. And until next, all the best. Have a good day. Take care.